Here we have a SAT math question. Okay, let's go to the information. Which of the following functions has a graph in the xy plane that does not cross the x-axis? Okay, here in the given answer choices, each function is defined by f of x in terms of x. Usually, when we have the graph of a function in xy plane, so this f of x represents the y coordinate. So here in each answer choice, we can replace this f of x by y. Okay, so the graph of a function crosses x-axis. At that particular point, the y coordinate will be 0 and the x coordinate can be any real value. So to know whether the graph of the first function, for example, let me consider the function in answer choice A. So if I want to check whether the graph of this function crosses the x-axis or it does not cross the x-axis, what I have to do is I have to plug in y equals to 0. And when I plug in y equals to 0, if I get a real value for x, I have to understand, so the graph of this particular function crosses the x-axis. When I plug in y equals to 0, if I don't get a real value for x, then we have to understand the graph of this particular function does not cross the x-axis. Okay, now let me rewrite the function option A by replacing f of x by y. So then I'm getting y equals to 1 negative x square. Okay, now to check whether this function crosses, the graph of this function crosses the x-axis or not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in y equals to 0. Because at the point where the graph crosses x-axis, the y coordinate will be 0. So let me plug in y equals to 0. In that case, I'm getting 1 negative x square on the right side. So let me add x square to both sides, then I'm getting x square equals to 1. So now to solve for x, I'm taking square root on both sides. Whenever I take square root on both sides, I have to consider positive or negative sign for one of the square roots. So here I consider positive or negative sign for the square root we have on the right side. So on the left side, the square root and square root cancel out. I'm getting x equals to positive or negative. So square root of 1 is just 1. So I'm getting two real values for x. One is positive 1, another one is negative 1. So in this way, we can write 2 points, that is 1, 0. Because we have already taken y coordinate as 0. The second point is negative 1, 0. So when I take y equals to 0, I'm getting two real values for x. That means the graph of the function in answer choice A crosses the x-axis in 2 points. But according to the question, we have to find the function for which the graph does not cross the x-axis. Since the graph of the first function, in option A, crosses the x-axis, we can reject option A. Okay, now let me check the function we have in option B. Let me replace this f of x by y. Then I'm getting y equals to absolute value of x negative 1, or the same can be written as absolute value of x negative 1 equals to y. So since we have to find the point at where the graph crosses x-axis, we have to plug in y equals to 0. Let me plug in y equals to 0. When I do so, absolute value of x negative 1 equals to 0. Okay, usually whenever we solve absolute value equation, we'll take two branches, but here it is not required because we have 0 on the right side. Since we have 0 in this absolute value equation, simply we can consider the stuff we have inside the absolute value, that is x negative 1 equals to 0. So when I add 1 to both sides, I'm getting x equals to 1. Okay, in the function in option B, when I plug in y equals to 0, again I'm getting a real value for x, that is x equals to 1. So that means the graph crosses x, the graph of the function answer choice B crosses x-axis the point 1, 0. Okay, so the graph of the function in answer choice B also crosses x-axis, so we can reject option B also. Now let's check option C. For that, we have to replace this f of x by y. Then I'm getting the function y equals to x negative 1 the whole square, positive 1. Or the same function can be written in this way. That is, we can switch the stuff on the left side and right side. X negative 1 the whole square, positive 1 equals to y. Okay, so to check whether the graph of the function option C crosses x-axis or not, what I have to do is I have to plug in the same thing, whatever process I've done for option A and B, the same thing. That is, I have to plug in y equals to 0 and check whether I'm getting a real value for x or not. Okay, let me plug in y equals to 0 over here. Then I'm getting x negative 1 the whole square, positive 1 equals to 0. Okay, now to solve for x first, I have to get rid of this positive 1. For that, I subtract 1 from both sides. Positive 1, negative 1 will cancel. I'm getting x negative 1 the whole square equals to negative 1. Okay, now to get rid of the square, what I have to do is I have to take square root on both sides. When I do so, the square root and square root cancel out, and also for one of the square roots, I have to consider positive or negative sign. I am getting x negative 1 is equal to positive or negative square root of negative 1. Actually, this is an imaginary value. Whenever we have a negative value inside the square root, it is considered to be imaginary value. Even if I add 1 to both sides, I'm getting an imaginary value for x. That is complex solution. Okay, so when I plug in y equals to 0 in the function that we have in answer choice C, I don't get a real value for x. So since I don't get real value for x when I plug in y equals to 0, so the graph of the function in answer choice C clearly does not cross the x-axis. So the correct answer choice for this one is option C. Anyways, we can verify option D also. Let me erase the stuff over here. Just a moment, 1 second. So let me erase it. Okay, now we can verify option D also. For that, we have to replace this f of x by y. Then I'm getting y equals to x cube negative 1. Okay, so again, the same thing. We can switch the stuff on the left side and right side. Then I'm getting x cube negative 1 is equal to y. Let's plug in y equals to 0 and check whether we get a real value for x or not. Okay, so for that, we have to, okay, now let me plug in y equals to 0. In that case, I'm getting x negative 1 equals to 0. So I plugged in y equals to 0. To solve for x, I just add 1 to both sides. Negative 1, positive 1 will cancel. I'm getting x cube equals to just 1. Okay, to get up the cube over here, I have to take a cube root on both sides. Let me do it. So when I take cube root on both sides, cube root over here and the cube will cancel. I'm just getting x. Cube root of positive 1 is just 1. Okay, so in the function that we have in answer choice D, if I plug in y equals to 0, I'm getting a real value for x. So that is clearly the graph of the function in answer choice D crosses x-axis at the point 1, 0. So option D is also incorrect. So therefore, the correct answer choice for this question is option C.